this is Margarita with CityGal Puppetry. In this video, I share with you all the first art journal page that I created in my new DIY art journal. I am using pattern paper as my background. I am currently tearing the paper into smaller pieces so that I can make a collage onto the page. As I'm creating this page, I don't entirely know what I am doing. I usually start out a page with just a very rough idea of what I want. And in this page in particular, I knew I wanted some type of nighttime or galaxy background, but I wasn't entirely sure what exactly I was going to be doing with that. So I bring in my clear gesso to adhere my pieces of paper down. Normally, it's probably best to adhere your pieces of paper down with a gel medium. It's more like a glue or an adhesive, but I wanted everything to be completely like waterproof, so that's why I chose to adhere it down with the actual gesso, although normally you would use a gel medium for this part. And then you would put the clear gesso on top. So I'm randomly placing the pieces. I want them to kind of overlap each other. I don't want too much of the same patterns together. At this point, I'm still kind of not sure if I'm going to cover everything up with color or if I want the patterns to show through. So I'm trying not to put too many of the same patterns together. I want them sort of separate and to be kind of random. I'm using a fan brush, although any brush would do. A flat brush is really good for this also. I like the fan brush because it covers more of the surface that I am spreading the gesso onto. And so that's just a preference. I do speed this up because this is time consuming, but I did want you to get an idea of what it is like to just collage onto the paper and using the gesso. This clear gesso gives a really nice matte finish, so it's not shiny. Here I'm just drying everything up, making sure it's nice and dry before I continue. Then I grab a distress stain in chipped sapphire and I just spread it about. I'm gonna spritz it as well to get the color moving. I add a little bit more. So I like that the stains are very sheer. They don't give a full coverage, so you can see through the color. And they move, as you can see, they move really well once the color is wet, once the stain is wet. But it wasn't really giving me the look that I wanted. It was too blue for me. So I do dry it up and then I continue on to the next step. And the next step is really just adding another layer of a different color. In this case, those are dilution sprays, and one is pomegranate seed and black marble. I go ahead and spray them on my background, and I lift my page up and I move it around so that the spray itself will move around on the page to cover more of the collage. So after I spray the black, I go ahead and spray some of the red. I try to make sure I wipe down the nozzle right away because I have experienced many clogs. If you don't do that right away, sometimes the nozzle does get clogged and it doesn't spray too well later on. I am now cutting circles and semicircles from this other pattern paper that looks like a red sky or red clouds or kind of purplish clouds. I dry my background again. Once it's dry, I notice that there's some yellowish orangey parts that are left behind from the color. I think it's the pomegranate seed. Once it's dry, I'm not sure if it's just the mixture of that spray with the black that made that sort of color, but I go ahead and I add more of the black marble spray to try to darken those areas up a little bit more. And you can see it didn't really make much of a difference, but it doesn't matter because I'm going to collage over this anyway. Now I decide I want to use the circles and semicircles to look like different moons or planets in a galaxy or out in the universe. And I go ahead and I'm working on the composition of where I want everything. Once I get a rough idea, I go ahead and add some spritzes in white. I use titanium white acrylic paint to do that. Now I sprayed down the paint fairly thin. If you keep it a bit thicker, you're able to get some more solid opaque spritzes. My white spritzes came out a bit sheer, so you can once they dry you can see through them. But if you want more solid color, you'd want that white to be a little thicker. So once I'm done with that, I start to glue down my different moons. I cut the excess paper off of the edges. And I continue to glue down my circles. I did smudge a little bit this one, but it's not a big deal. I put some acrylic blocks onto the ones that I've just glued down to keep them in place since my paper is slightly warped from the collaging. The glue I'm using, I think, is Elmer's Craft Bond, if I'm not mistaken, and it's a nice and thick glue and it does adhere different types of materials, so that's why I chose this one to glue these down onto the paper. And now I move on to my image. I drew this whimsical portrait girl on a piece of white cardstock, and I'm now going to color her in using mostly Prismacolor pencils. I think I also use some Faber-Castell pencils, and I do smooth it out with Gamsol and those white blenders. So I try to jot down the colors that I use in case anyone wants to know, and you put a little sample on the side, both for me and for you guys, just to see what it looks like from lighter to darkest, depending on how much pressure you use. And then I do also sample the Gamsol on them to see what they would look like once I'm using them to color my image. So the top one is goldenrod, then there's yellow ochre, sienna brown, and that one is cream, but you can't really see what is written because it's so light. And these are the colors that I'm going to be using for the flesh tone for my image. And here I'm just showing you what they look like once you dip the blending stick into the Gamsol and then and rub it onto the actual pigment of the pencil. So you can see it really does smooth it out. Now when I do get the Gamsol, I don't like taking off the entire foil top. I just poke a hole in it, and this allows me to just insert the tip of the blender stick so that I don't have to pour it out onto anything. I just, flip the bottle over with the tip in the hole, and it just, that works just fine. So I start coloring from darkest to lightest. I start with the shading. I do, after I color her in, go back to add more to the shadows if necessary. I also speed this up quite a bit because it is time consuming. I'm now adding my second color, again starting from the darkest point and shading out into the lightest. I really like that these colored pencils by Prismacolor blend really well with each other. They also layer on very well, so you can layer one color over the next, especially when they're in this sort of order of shade, where you've got like the same color family almost, but in just different shades, lighter to darkest. They blend really well. So I then use my lightest color, and then I go ahead and smooth everything out with the Gamsol. I zoom in quite a bit just so you can get a look at that, but I'm almost off screen, so I apologize for that. But I'm looking down and not up, so I'm not really paying attention to what is visible, but it is in the frame. So you can see there, once you use the Gamsol, the color is much richer. It is brighter and it stands out much better. It just smooths and blends everything together. Now I bring in a couple of pinks for the lips. And I do have different brands. I bring in a different brand here, the Faber-Castell, which is why I am just jotting down the brand. So I've got Prismacolors on top, and then the ones at the bottom are by Faber-Castell. I only have a few of these Faber-Castell pencils, so I don't use them very often. I don't have a whole lot of experience with them, but they do seem to be quite smooth when you color in with them. Even with more pressure, you can see that they do color quite smoothly, and they also blend in very well. So for the lips, I start with the lightest color right in the middle. It helps to give her lips a little bit more dimension. And then I use the darkest color on the edge of her lips and just below the cupid's bow. I bring in my Gamsol and I blend everything in. And then I bring in a dark brown for her eyes. This is also a Prismacolor pencil. Now I didn't get the rest of the coloring because I did run out of battery and I didn't realize, so I apologize for that. But I did color in her hair in a blue, and then I bring in my heavy gel to start gluing her down onto the background. Now the sprays that I used they do react with water, so when I wet it with the gel, you can see that some of the color was lifted off onto the brush, which is why it looks muddy like that. So I have to be sure not to use the brush on top of my image, or I will completely destroy it. But it does glue down the image quite well. I did also color her top with black. It was just a black Prismacolor pencil. So for my stash, I bring in these petals and these flowers, and I glue them in also with the heavy body gel. And it's really just like a really thick glue. It can glue down almost anything. This one I think has a glossy finish, if I'm not mistaken, so you can also use it to seal your work if you want to, giving it a nice glossy finish. This gel is also good if you want to create texture in your background. This one is clear, so if you wanted to keep the background, say in that color, in that black color, but you wanted to have more texture in it, you could, for example, use a sponge or some other type of textured medium and just pat it on to the background, or swirl it, or do anything you'd like to be able to give yourself some waves or some indentations or any kind of texture that you would like. I cut the stems off of my flowers because I don't want to use them, and then I adhere those as well. You could also use a glue gun to glue these down. I had my gel right next to me. I had keep all of my art journaling materials all in one place, and so that's why I use this instead of my glue gun. So I bring in my white gel pen, add a few white details to have it look like there's some shine, and I do that to the eyes, the hair, and the moons as well. Now the trick for this is just keeping the white details all on the same side. Then I bring in my shimmer pen, and as you can see, it's really, really shimmery. And I had stored it pointed downward, so all of the liquid was at the brush. And so when I opened it, it just dripped. And so I just let it drip all over the page randomly. That's one of those things, you know, you make an error, just part of your work. And then I dripped some onto the flower petals, and I'm now just tapping it so that some of those large drops just kind of drip down the page. Now, because the background sprays they're still reactive with water or liquid, when this liquid touches it, you will see some of the color is dragged down with the drop. And some of it did go onto one of the moons, which doesn't bother me. It's just part of the look of the work, of the piece, and I'm completely fine with that. I go ahead and dry that up. And then I also add some glimmer onto her hair. I didn't sketch the image of the girl on camera, but if anyone is interested in seeing me draw the portrait, a whimsical portrait of the girl, it's usually the same. I can definitely make a video on that if you guys are interested. Just leave that in the comments. I go ahead and add my title, which is just I am the soulful moon. And that really completes the page. I try to add another few details with the white gel pen. And then I am all done. I hope that you have enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun making this page. And if you did like it, please give me a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And I hope to see you all again in the next one. Have a great day.